discussion on the bill. I recognize myself, and I strongly support Congressman McClintock's bill, H.R. 178, the Put Out the Fire Act, which clearly instructs federal land managers to immediately and aggressively suppress wildfires in exceptionally hot, dry areas when there are volatile conditions on the ground. Now, specifically, this bill requires the Forest Service and the Department of Interior to aggressively attack wildfires that begin on federal lands, and this is when it's under dangerous drought conditions or the highest at-risk fire shed. This requirement would also apply when the National Interagency Fire Center declares a level 5 of national fire preparedness. And as we know, level 5 represents the period when our federal firefighting apparatus is at its most strained and when we lack the additional resources to commit to fighting new, larger fires. This bill, again, only applies to lands under extreme drought conditions or top 10% highest fire risk. It is definitely not a one-size-fits-all scenario. We know that fire, when properly controlled, has historically been an effective tool for reducing wildfire risk, improving forest health, and restoring wildlife habitats. We always seem to talk about prescribed burns, but there's another part to that that conveniently gets left off. It's thin and burn. It's managing the forest and then following up with a low-intensity fire, and that's what forest management is. It's not setting a fire or watching a fire burn in a forest that's already overgrown and subject to catastrophic wildfire. That really is like having a rattlesnake in your room and watching it to see if it's going to do any damage. The absence of forest management has created conditions where letting fires burn on our federal lands, particularly out west, is more often akin to arson than to management. Catastrophic fire is bad for forest health, bad for wildlife habitat, and certainly bad for the communities that have seen entire neighborhoods reduced to ash and rubble. The Put Out the Fire Act also addresses the unacceptable phenomena of prescribed fire failures in which controlled burns are unwittingly transformed into raging infernos. The largest and most destructive wildfire in New Mexico's history, the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire, was a prescribed fire failure which went on to burn over 340,000 acres, destroy more than 900 structures, and rack up over $278 million in suppression costs. Again, this was a prescribed fire on a forest that was overgrown and should have been thinned before it was burned. In the wake of the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire, we accepted a bipartisan amendment from Representative Ledger Fernandez to this legislation in the committee last year and reported the bill out by voice vote. The amendment places important guardrails on the use of prescribed fires and other suppression strategies such as backfires or burnouts. In areas with the highest level of wildfire risk, there is no room for a slow firefighting response. We are currently witnessing the tragic consequences of slow response times in Arizona, where the Dragon Bravo fire is engulfing Grand Canyon National Park. The fire has burned nearly 12,000 acres and destroyed approximately 100 structures, including the iconic Grand Canyon Lodge located at the park's north rim. Concerningly, the fire was allowed to burn for several days before land managers attempted to stop it. Allowing wildfire to burn in Arizona during the peak of summer in one of the National Park System's crown jewels really is entirely unacceptable. I suspect that some of these federal land managers let these fires burn because they can't get the permitting done to actually do a prescribed fire under normal conditions. But when the fire strikes, or when the lightning strikes and creates a fire, I think they're oftentimes gambling on whether they want to get a little bit of a prescribed or a burn on the underbrush or take the risk of having a fire get out of hand. And too many times these fires are getting out of hand. I believe there is more bipartisan support. Mr. Huffman, I think this is something we agree on in forest management. I know you sent a letter this week, and from your letter it says, while managed fire practices are a necessary tool in many circumstances to reduce hazardous fuel loads and achieve other management objectives, it appears they were clearly the wrong approach in this case, given the exceptionally hot, dry, and volatile conditions on the ground. I totally agree with that. That's why I'm wondering why this isn't a UC bill.
It's one size fits all.
Yeah, well, again, it is restricted to those most hazardous conditions, and I don't believe it is one size fits all. I think what the Put Out the Fire Act does is it's taking concrete action so that we're not put back in this situation again. It proposes reasonable reforms that will ensure land managers are aggressively confronting wildfires that pose the highest risk to the American people, thereby protecting lives and property. I want to thank and commend Congressman McClintock for his leadership in this vital effort. I urge my colleagues to support the legislation, and I yield back. Is there further